Now, back in June, I broke the news right here on this channel that Uber was getting into the car sharing game and was officially going to compete with Turo. And today, I can officially say that Uber has launched in the United States, with Boston being their first market. And I have the exclusive inside scoop. I'm going to share with you guys the 5 key things that you need to know if you're thinking about sharing your car on Uber's platform, including revenue splits, cars they cover, and all the juicy details. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you hit that subscribe button, because after I drop this video, you will see other YouTubers releasing the same information, but I've been super fortunate to actually connect with the Uber car sharing team to get all the exclusive inside details when they are released. So I will be breaking it here first on this channel. And no, I'm not paid by them. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, shape, or form, other than connecting with some of their team members just to get information so I can bring it to you guys, the community, so you can be the first to know in case it's an enticing opportunity for you. And as always, we will be analyzing all the details with an unbiased approach. So let's dive in. Okay, so I have poured hours into reading through all the literature that Uber car sharing provided me to bring you guys the most important pieces of information that you know, especially after hosting on Turo. We know exactly the key things that we are looking for. Now, it is very clear based on some of the policies that Uber car share has set forth that they are certainly trying to compete with Turo and maybe trying to poach some of their hosts onto their platform. Now, let's start off with the number one thing that stood out to me, which was that Uber is going to allow you to have cars that are 15 years old or newer on their platform, in comparison to Turo that allows you to have 12-year-old cars or newer on the platform. So a little bit of a tongue twister there, but clearly they are opening the range of the type of cars that you can have, which is going to apply to more people. Now, pros and cons there in that if you have much older vehicles, you're going to have the opportunity to list their cars. But after being a host on the Turo platform, we know that when you have highly aged vehicles, cars that are super old, very high in mileage, it can certainly cause a lot of issues in the experience of the guest, and also a lot of variable maintenance costs for you as the host. So it definitely has its pros and cons when it comes to listing older cars on the platform. But it looks like Uber has the edge by 3 years if you consider it an edge. Now, the number 2 thing that really stood out to me is that Uber Carshare is allowing hosts to list cars that have 200,000 miles on them, whereas with Turo, the cap is 130,000 miles. So again, that really opens up the range of possibility for a lot of people who have either aged vehicles or vehicles that have a lot of mileage on them. Now, for certain cars, it's definitely not a problem, especially our tried and true vehicles like our Toyotas, our Hondas that will go and live forever, and you don't have those types of maintenance issues when you list cars with that many miles on it. So it is interesting. I always wonder what they base the mileage off of. I'm assuming they have some kind of data set that allows them to really figure out what would be optimal, but there is a 70,000 mile difference there, which again is going to give Uber the edge in terms of the amount of cars that would be eligible to be listed on their platform versus what is eligible to be listed on Turo. So you can see where they're trying to sort of edge out what the Turo platform offers versus what they're going to offer. Now, the next thing is, which I thought was pretty interesting and a huge game changer that a lot of people probably don't understand. The number 3 thing is that the actual cash value of a vehicle that Uber car sharing will cover is up to $50,000. So let's say you purchase an $80,000 vehicle and it has some miles on it. So in today's actual real-time cash value, it's worth $65,000, and it gets totaled on the Uber car sharing platform. Because they're capped at $50,000 in coverage of value, that means they're only going to pay out $50,000, meaning you lost out on $15,000 worth of value. Whereas Turo, they have a huge difference in that they cover up to $200,000 $50,000 in actual cash value of a vehicle. And I think one of the things that really shows in these three things that we have seen so far is that Turo definitely has a segment of their market where they cater to much higher end, luxury, medium luxury category cars, right? So it's appealing to maybe a little bit of a different audience in terms of their offering and what type of coverage they're willing to provide their hosts so that their hosts feel comfortable really listing some of these high-end cars. And that's definitely the reason why you see on the Turo platform cars like Rolls Royces, your Ferraris, and your ultra high-end stuff where people feel comfortable enough because that actual cash value coverage is there. Now that is a massive difference of $150,000 in coverage between Uber's $50,000 and Turo's $200,000 coverage. So that is a major difference and something to certainly consider. Now, when I went on Uber's platform, I looked into the Boston market. I did see a few cars that were brand new, let's say a 2023 Suburban, for example. And we know that those are very, very pricey. Now, unless this person has a 2023 Suburban that has really depreciated in value or somehow they got a really good deal on it, it is likely that it is potentially worth more than $50,000, which does put them a little bit at risk in the event that their car gets totaled and they need to be paid out for the value of the vehicle, at which point they would only be covered up to $50,000. So it is kind of interesting to see. Now, hands down, the number 4 thing, and this is probably the key thing that stood out to me the most, is that Uber car sharing is not going to charge its host any deductibles for damage claims. So zero cost damage claims. Now, this is a huge point of friction and contention between Turo host and Turo themselves, is when it comes to damage claims and your renter is clearly at fault, you have all the documentation in the world to prove it, your damage claims are approved. However, you as the host are still responsible for your deductible, whatever that deductible is based on your host protection plan. This is probably the number one thing that I see that people are most surprised about when they go and file their damage claims with Turo, when they come to realize, oh my gosh, I'm responsible to pay this deductible, even though my renter was obviously at fault, but that is just the nature of how Turo's host protection plans work. Now, Uber's car sharing platform calls their version of host protection plan the owner guarantee, because technically it's not insurance for legal reasons. And basically they are saying that there is going to be zero cost damage claims. So that is the number 4 key differentiator. Now, it got me thinking, okay, if Uber is doing zero cost damage claims, there surely has to be a catch somewhere, right? Like it's too good to be true almost. And then I came to find out it is a little bit. So the number 5 thing that really stood out to me is that Uber's split of the revenue. Now, their structure is very different than Turo's in that they have a time rate for their vehicles, meaning that's the actual sort of like day rate for your car. And then they have a distance rate. So they are charging based on 2 aspects. So the time rate for your vehicle, which can be hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and then a per mile distance rate, which they set based on data that they have in the market. And that is to really cover any wear and tear, fuel costs, maintenance, and things like that for your vehicle. So it's a very interesting model that is very intriguing to me. However, when it comes to your time rate, which in Turo lingo, I would consider that to be your day rate, they do take a flat cut of 40%. So on Turo's platform, we have a choice between 5 host protection plans, which determines the percentage that Turo is going to take. But on Uber's platform, they just have one simple, straightforward method, which is as a host, you get 60% of your time rate and they take 40%. And that 40% is what covers, your damage claims, roadside assistance, and things like that. So that's where that comes from. However, they on top of that have a distance rate. So that is sort of a second tier of earnings for you, which may or may not offset that 40% that they take I don't know exactly how the math works out because it's all very new right now, but as this gets up and going, I will calculate and do the math for all of us here so we can fully understand it, and then we'll get a better picture of what earnings could look like. Now, in comparison to Turo, if you're trying to, figure out what's the best platform for you, Turo does have 5 host protection plans, and it varies from them taking 10% of your day rate. So, you keep 90% of your earnings, and it goes all the way to 40% as well, where they take 40% of your day rate and you take 60. So very similar to Uber's model. And that all determines, what your deductibles might look like. Now, as we mentioned, Uber has zero cost damage claims, and Turo has anywhere between $0 to $2,500 deductibles. And that can really, again, range based on your host protection plan. Now, I am going to put a bunch of helpful links that will give you a deeper dive into this information down in the description below. But this I find to be very fascinating. Now, I spoke about this just very little bit in a previous video, but it is really interesting to see how these markets are going to emerge. Now, the one thing that really stands out to me about Uber is the fact that they have massive distribution. And what that means is that they have a customer base, a user base, whether it's Uber drivers or riders, of almost 100 million people, whereas Turo has roughly around 4 million or so people from the stats that I most recently saw. So that is a massive difference in terms of reach. And it looks like Uber's been testing out this concept in Australia. They acquired a company called Car Next Door, which helped them evolve into Uber Carshare. They proved out the model there and now are starting their expansion into North America, with Boston being their very first market in the USA. So it is really interesting times. There was also some news on the horizon that Airbnb's CEO Brian Chesky announced that getting into car rentals was going to be the thing that they sort of tackle next. And it makes a lot of sense because Airbnb has been going through some growing pains and some troubles with major cities all around the United States. And it seems like they need to give themselves and their host another vertical of earnings. And of course, if a host has, a residential property that they could rent out, the probability of them having a vehicle that they may be interested in renting out, it seems to be pretty promising. So I would not be surprised at all if Airbnb expands into the space as well, which will just really open up the amount of platforms that exist. Now, who will come out to be the winner and to dominate the car sharing world? I have no idea, but I would love to hear from you guys on what you think about how this is all going to evolve. Who will emerge as the winner? Will we have more than one? And which platform will dominate this space? So comment below because I would absolutely love to hear what you guys think about it. If you want to hear more about Airbnb getting into the game, you can check out this video right here where I talk through their entire announcement.